Hey all, Bree from the No Guilt Mom podcast, and I have got a gift for you this holiday season. If you love the No Guilt Mom podcast, and I mean love the No Guilt Mom podcast, then tell us about it. Leave us a review, and you can be entered to win a No Guilt Mom gift card. All you have to do is leave a review, take a screenshot, and then simply go to noguiltmom.com/review to enter our giveaway for a free No Guilt Mom gift card, simply for telling us what you think about the podcast. It is amazing. But don't delay. Get right on this, as we're going to be giving away that No Guilt Mom gift card on December 21st. So get right on over and visit noguiltmom.com/review.
Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast. I am your host, Joanne Crone, joined here by my co-host, Bree Tucker.
Ba-dum. Hello, everybody. How are you?
Bum.
Like that? Ba-dum.
I like that.
I like bees. They're fun. Ba-ba.
We could do like all of the vocal warm-ups. I'm sure all of you listening would enjoy us just doing vocal warm-ups for you. Yeah? Future podcast episode?
Yeah. Today's episode is brought to you by the bee sound.
Ba-dum. I hope that you take that throughout your day and that everything you see, you'll be like, ba-dum.
I know. We should try that. We should try like a day challenge of like every time we see somebody starting our sentence of the first time we're talking to somebody for that day with a ba-dum. I think it would be a fun social experiment.
There's like that Muppet skit.
I love that song. Do you know they have, Cake did a cover of it?
No, I didn't.
And Cake being a band that is pretty much spoken word, a little bit of rap plus rock.
Yes, it's so funny because
very interesting.
Do you know that spoken word thing? It was very prevalent in the 90s, and there's a lot of 90s songs with the spoken word. And we listened to this on, we listened to Lithium, which is on XM.
Yes, I missed my subscription to that. I need to get back on that.
So we were in the car, and every time one of those songs comes on, my kids are like, this isn't a song. What are they doing? Like they're just talking. Back.
Oh, the 90s. Such a lovely time.
We were like, this was a thing in the 90s. They're like, oh.
Did you see that Holderness Family skit that I sent you recently?
I don't know which one.
For those of you that listen, I know I do.
Bree sends a lot of Holderness Family.
For those of you that listen to us, you know that we love the Holderness Family. So much love. But she did one last week about 90s music and how we're all like, 90s music was so much better than the music these days.
It's totally
and then she compares the lyrics and she's like, oh.
There was some stuff about the 90s though, because they're like, BuzzFeed and whatever those BuzzFeed articles get me all the time, where it's like top 20 photos from MTV Spring Break that'll take you back. And I'm like, oh, I remember MTV Spring Break. And so I click. Actually, this might have been Cosmo, not whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyways, so I was looking through and you saw like Molly Sims and you saw Rebecca Romaine and like Mandy Moore before she was like, This Is Us Mandy Moore. She was like singer Mandy Moore.
She was like 15 Mandy Moore. Yeah.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, I had such a horrible like body like image in the 90s, and just looking at those pictures, I'm like, and there's where my horrible body image came from, because in the 90s it was like the thing to be like very stick thin.
Well, you had Kate Moss,
but even like looking at the pictures of Rebecca Romaine and Molly Sims, like they were stick thin, like. Even now, which I'm glad that like we have a much better body image now. I mean, it's not perfect, but it did not look like the 90s. I should show you. You'd be like, what? Like what we thought was like acceptable body image for like women and how women should look like. It was ridiculous.
I do have a moment where I come back to that myself for self-reflection. Let's see, what was it? Sophomore or junior year of college, I went on a road trip back because I went to college in Missouri, but my family lived out here in Arizona. So we road tripped out here with a couple of my sorority sisters. And I remember that myself and my two college roommates, we went and got belly button piercings because, we were 20.
I wanted one of those. Yeah.
So we did it. And there's a picture of all of us with our shirts up and our little belly button piercings. And I remember looking at that picture nowadays. I'm like, look how toned we were. Look how like small we were. And I remember thinking to myself at that time that I was so not skinny. I was huge. And again, all those negative thoughts.
It's your image of yourself.
Right. It's interesting how that inner dialogue really, really can morph so many things in life.
It does. It does. And now let's change to our guest, Jessica Lahey.
Well, if we do talk a little bit about past experiences with this episode, and I just have to be excited, Jessica's another part of our Two Timers Club.
The
and I mean that as a positive. Second timers.
We decided
we can't say two timers. It sounds like they're cheating.
Two timers.
Okay, Second Timers Club. What's up for Jessica Lahey?
Yes, Jessica Lahey, one of our favorites, because she's so down to earth and so knowledgeable. Like I love talking to her because I learn so much every time that we have an interview with her, anytime we chat. And she's so like giving with her information.
Right.
She is a giver.
And, we quote her first book quite a bit.
The Gift of Failure.
The Gift of Failure. And I can see this second book being something that is going to become quite important as time progresses as well.
Because Jessica, as we said, she's the author of The Gift of Failure, and her forthcoming book is called The Addiction Inoculation, which we're going to talk about more in this interview. She also has a podcast about writing called the #AmWriting Podcast with another favorite, KJ Delantonia, and Serena Bowen, and she's the mom of 2 boys. So we hope that you enjoy our interview with Jessica Lahey. This episode is brought to you by the Drama-Free Homework Checklist. Oh, if you are just so tired of all the fighting and the hassle and the procrastination when it comes to your kids' homework, pick up this Drama-Free Homework Checklist. It is absolutely free, and you can go get it at noguiltmom.com/DFH-checklist. You can also find a link to it in our show notes. And now, on with the show.
You want mom life to be easier. That's our goal too. Our mission is to raise more self-sufficient and independent kids, and we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to help you delegate and step back. Each episode will tackle strategies for positive discipline, making our kids more responsible and making our lives better in the process. Welcome to the No Guilt Mom Podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast, Jessica. We're so happy to have you here.
I am so excited to come back. Yay. So much fun the first time. It's going to be so much fun.
So since we talked last time, we both been following you on social media. And last night, I believe you posted something about how you totally lost control of your house.
And somebody had a green suit on?
Yeah. So my 17-year-old came down the stairs and I literally jumped. I didn't know what he was because he was dressed from head to toe in this green Lycra suit. And it turns out that on the show, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, there's a reference to the Green Man thing. And my son has a Discord server that he runs for producing digital music, essentially. And so he asked them what he should do for a stunt. And I don't actually know what he's going to do with the Green Man costume, but I do have a 17-year-old walking around my house in head to toe Lycra green, like green screen green. Yeah. It's weird. It's very weird, but it's fun. Like that's
Hilarious.
when the most interesting stuff happens.
Well, and what I love too was so the first picture was him in a stance, right? And we'll have to include this in
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. But then the next one is your husband's just chilling on the couch with the dog, nothing's new. And your son's just there in the green suit. It's this is an everyday.
Well, we were watching he was watching television. Apparently you can see through the Green Man suit. Yeah.
Oh my Lord.
I remember when those were really big for Halloween and all of the Halloween stores had them. Yeah. It was purple, yellow, green. You're just one color person.
Wow.
Yeah.
He spent his own money, his hard-earned money. He worked he's a junior librarian until the pandemic hit. And so he spent his own hard-earned money on head to toe Lycra. So there you go. There's my kid.
We need to find somebody who's doing a weather report and just let your son.
Oh my gosh. That would be fantastic. That would be fantastic.
pull off his head part and just be a floating head. Woo!
Oh my gosh, that'd be so great. Actually, when my kids were really little, and I have pictures of this too, they wanted a green screen. My older son was into filming stuff. So I basically Googled, what paint color from the major paint companies you can get that is green screen green. And they painted an entire wall in essentially the room, like a living room area. So for about a year and a half, we had the most repellent green color on one wall in a living room, but they had a lot of fun with it. It was really, really fun. And there was paint everywhere. There was paint on the dog. There was paint on the baseboard. I think the 17-year-old was about 5 or 6 when I let them paint this. So you can imagine how that went, but it was super fun.
There's probably paint everywhere. Definitely.
Right?
Yeah. I can see how that goes, but green screens are super fun and you could do a lot with them. And
yeah, and this was before it was easy to get like just the piece of fabric that I could have, hung from the wall instead of painting.
Now,
the entire wall.
paint.
Once people realized that it was really fun and cool, they're like, there's got to be an easier way.
And it's a hard color to cover. I will tell you that right now.
I bet. Multiple coats, I'm sure. So you have a new book coming out, The Addiction Inoculation, set for release April 6th. Is that correct?
April 6th that comes out. Yeah.
So we're hitting that time of year where my brain gets so overloaded in December that I look for anything to make life easier. And I have to say, Brie, that Green Chef is one of those services.
Yes, Green Chef is there to take away the dreaded, oh my goodness, what are we going to eat for dinner tonight? You can eat clean all holiday long with over 80 weekly meal options each week, featuring things like quick and easy, protein-packed, calorie-smart, or my personal favorite, the keto options.
And you don't have to lose track of healthy eating habits during the holidays because every Green Chef customer gets a free session with one of their registered dietitians who can walk you through how to make clean eating work for you, which is very cool.
And I have to say that I have been loving their recipes lately. They put things together I have never thought of. This week, we're trying the lemon basil caper pork with sauteed cauliflower, bell peppers, almonds, and feta cheese, my favorite. Their recipes make it so easy to support my wellness goals without skipping on flavor.
For Green Chef's best deal of the year, get $250 off with code NGM250 at greenchef.com/NGM250. That's greenchef.com/NGM250. And don't forget to use that code NGM250 to get $250 off.
Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. It is so hard to raise kids who know how to manage money. Brie, right now, my kids are all about earning money for presents. My daughter wants to get presents for all of her friends, and my son is doing a Secret Santa with his friends.
Oh, I hear you. And if you're looking to raise kids that are financially responsible, we have got a lifesaver recommendation for you that you need to check out. It is Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app made for families that gives kids and teens an easy and fun way to gain financial literacy, all while giving parents peace of mind.
You can send instant money transfers, automate allowance, and even keep an eye on kids' spending with real-time notifications. Meanwhile, your kids can begin their journey towards financial autonomy by learning how to save, invest, and spend wisely.
So sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/NGM.
That's greenlight.com/NGM to try Greenlight for free. Greenlight.com/NGM.
So tell us a little bit about the book.
So, there's this scary thing that happens, this second book thing that happens when you've had a successful first book and, you've poured your heart and soul into it and you had lots of time to come up with that topic. Then people immediately after the first book comes out, they're like, so what are you working on next? And for a long time, like 4 years, I was like, I don't know. And I tossed my editor and my agent actually a lot of ideas. And she's like, not quite. And finally, one day I just had this, sort of light bulb moment where I realized that the work I had been doing for 5 years, I was an English teacher I was an everything teacher, essentially, in an inpatient drug and alcohol rehab for kids, my own recovery of nearly 8 years now, and parenting 2 kids under this genetic and epigenetic specter of, substance abuse, because, there is an increased risk. My kids are at increased risk for substance abuse, for their lifetime risk of substance abuse is up. So I wanted a book that sort sort of addressed, I love books that are part nonfiction, part memoir, sort of the nonfiction research-based stuff, and then memoir. So that's what this book is. It's sort of my story as a story of one of my students and the friend of one of my children, both of whom are adults now, who were really generous and shared their stories. The girl that I taught, her name is Georgia. She's in the book under her real name. She, quit high school, heroin addict, and she had a child who had to be given up. And, it's a very long and scary, and she almost died. And now she's getting her master's degree in graduated college 10 years after her peers, that sort of thing. And then all these other stories. Anyway, so it's memoir. It's a very research-based story of what do we as parents and educators and mentors and coaches do? What can we control? Because the party line on substance abuse is that it's preventable. So, but what does that mean?
Right.
It is preventable. So now what? And what do really good programs look like? And as I was diving into the research and finding out crazy things like only 57% of schools in the US have any kind of substance abuse prevention program. And of those programs, only 10% of them are evidence-based. So what are we doing? And a lot of them wait until middle school. And at that point, it's too late because most kids, if they're going to try substances, try during middle school. So there's so much here about what I as a parent can do, what I as a teacher can do, what schools can do, and there's coaches can do a ton, mentors can do a ton. So I wanted to look at all the research, pull everything I could in and say, okay, what's worth talking about, what's not worth talking about, and what do we do moving forward to prevent substance use in kids?
That's so interesting when you talk about schools and substance abuse programs, because it makes me think of like when we were in middle school and high school, and I can't think of any substance abuse programs other than DARE.
I was going to say we're the generation of DARE.
Yeah,
and
DARE.
I think that's really important because they talk a lot about that now. Like I've been listening, Joanne, since doing this, you've turned me quite on to podcasts. So I'm glad. I'm glad. Now. And I've been listening to a few of these lately because I have two kids in junior high and I'm like starting to freak out with the whole like, oh my gosh, they're getting into that stage and I'm so ill-equipped. Like, even though I have a background somewhat in mental health and I worked with substance abuse in college and everything, like I definitely, going back to my techniques, like it's DARE is my background. And I think our whole generation of parents, a lot of us, that's what we know is the whole like, just say no. And as you're saying, Jessica, like that's not the tools that you need.
Well, it turns out that DARE, and I want to give DARE props because when DARE first came out, it came out of the police force in Los Angeles. And at the time, that was sort of thought to be the gold standard. But what they found out was that based on the research, that kids were actually more likely to use substances if they had gone through DARE than if they hadn't. So DARE actually did go back and re-engineer. It's not a program I still would recommend, but that's because the most effective programs are not exclusively substance abuse prevention programs. They are social emotional learning programs. They are programs that start like talking in kindergarten about how if you see medication on the counter, and your name is not on it, then you shouldn't be taking those things. Or here's why we brush our teeth. Here's why we wash our hands. We do these things that are good for us. And talking about like refusal skills. If someone asks you to do something that you're not comfortable with, or eat something you're not comfortable with, or take a medication you're not comfortable with, that you have the vocabulary and the practice to say, I'm uncomfortable with that. So it starts as like a health, social emotional learning and health program from the time kids are in kindergarten and nursery school all the way through college. So talking about substance abuse prevention programs, we have to give the caveat that we're not talking about programs that just do that, because those programs don't tend to work very well.
That's so important. So what I hear you saying is that kids really need to start young, and it's not just on substance abuse. It's really about, teaching them how to refuse things and say no, and also good health habits.
There's some really, really cool research on this thing called inoculation theory. And it turns out that when we give kids the tools to, so let's say you're worried your kid is going to get offered drugs and they want to say no, but the person who offers them, if in return to that, in exchange for that no, says, oh, well, everybody's doing it. Well, it turns out that everybody's not doing it. And there is data to back that up. Like we have really good data based on 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade of what percentage actually is doing it. So inoculation theory is really cool because it says that if you give your kids the responses that you can give in return to the everybody's doing it, it's no big deal, it won't hurt you, come on, just, any of these sort of popular retorts to no, that not only does it increase the chances that your child will be protected from substance use, it also protects them against other risky behaviors. Inoculation theory has been shown, like, for example, if I'm teaching about substance abuse refusal skills, it also can protect them against early sexual activity. It can protect them against, other high risk activities. So it's really cool in that you can teach about one behavior and it will one high risk activity, and it will generalize to others. So yeah, you got to start really early, and it all comes down to like, why do we put things in our body, and what do we put in our body, and why? And let's look at this in the book. I get really granular, and I actually give like scripts and stuff. So like if you're with your kid and you're in the bathroom brushing teeth and there's medication thing on the counter and your kid is learning their letters, you can say, what letters do you see? And what do you recognize? Or if your kid's learning how to read, you can say, is mommy's name on that? Or can you find our address on that? And whose name is on that? And if your name is on it, not your kid's name, it's a great moment to say, so you can never take these, right? Because these are just for mommy and they're prescribed by my doctor in an amount that's just right for me and my body and not for anybody else. And those are conversations that start really early.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I would have never thought to go over that with my kids in terms of medication and pill bottles.
I wouldn't have either.
I haven't talked to them about this.
I feel bad. I'm like,
yeah.
I would have thought of that.
There's all kinds of jokes to be made about it. I mean, David Sedaris in one of his books jokes about the fact that his dad took antibiotics that was meant for his dog because his dad was like, antibiotics are antibiotics. But, and then there's the whole, like, we do it all the time. There's that whole, thing that you see on television about, oh, you're really stressed out. Here, take one of my Xanax, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And kids see those all the time. And what's amazing to dive into is the research on what kids see and what that does to them in terms of their understanding of how we use drugs and alcohol. In fact, I was doing a podcast I was doing a live speaking event the other night online, and comments were coming in with questions and answers. And one parent made the joke about how I said something about giving ourselves a break right now during the pandemic because, we just need to give ourselves and our kids a break. And one woman made a joke about going and having a glass of wine. And I said, not to call you out or anything, but I just want to point out that we can say all we want to our kids about how we use substances to, whether they're prescribed for us or not. And when we tell kids that, you really can't use alcohol as a way with coping with your stress, you really have to work on that stress or work on that discomfort or whatever. And so when our kids see us repeatedly turn to wine as like the thing we need in order to come down from a really stressful day, that sends a really important message to them about why we drink and what we drink and how much we drink.
That's a really, really interesting thought, because that's become kind of part of our everyday language. Like, you have a stressful day and I need a drink is like, it's almost automatic for many parents to say. However, like parents do have a choice to like drink some wine. So like,
of course. My husband drinks, actually. My husband drinks. He doesn't have a problem. And, so our kids have me as an example in terms of abstinence, and they have my husband and, as an example in terms of moderation.
So as an adult who does like do moderation, like how would you say we describe that to kids? Like when they do see us having a drink?
Some people reach into the whole, I like it. I'm a wine aficionado, whatever. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying I like to have a beer every now and then. I really like beer or, those sorts of things. But I think we also have to have the conversation about the fact that, a beer may help me unwind at the end of the day, but it doesn't take my problems away. I mean, I think a lot of kids who start using substances are using them to escape from they're using it for multiple reasons, but one of them is to escape from trauma and pain and, or discomfort over their learning issues or discomfort over social ostracism, a whole bunch of these other risk factors. When kids start using to avoid that pain, it becomes really important to talk to them about the fact that, when you use a substance, it doesn't take that problem away. It just delays it and often compounds the consequences you're going to have to deal with later. So I think that line is a really important one. Like, I had a really stressful day, I'm going to have this glass of wine, but I also have to come up with a strategy for dealing with the thing that made me really stressed out today. That problem doesn't go away. Yeah.
That's a clear distinction. Distinction about like, I like wine versus like, I'm going to just drink so that I don't have to feel my feelings.
It's also important to remember that, it's only 10% of people that are going to develop, if 10% of people, well, I should say it the other way, 90% of people can drink, can use some drugs and be, not get addicted to those things. And yes, some things are more addictive than others, but for the 10% that can't, that's what I'm really curious about. Like the kids who do have a higher risk, and this book is for everyone, but because my perspective is someone whose kids do have a higher risk, what are the kinds of things you say to them? Because I can't, the same things that would work with most kids about why you don't drink and what it looks like when you become a little too excited about that drink at the end of the day. Those are the conversations I have to have with my kids.
Hey, all, Bree here, and I wanted to share one of my favorite gifts to give during the holiday season, a Storyworth book. It is the most amazing gift ever. Storyworth is an online service that lets you create a special and unique gift of someone's story. I've given Storyworth books to both of my parents, and it has been their favorite gift, hands down. And did I mention it is so easy? Storyworth emailed my parents questions every week that I handpicked from their massive list of questions that they have. All my parents had to do was open their email and answer them. That easy. I asked my dad questions like, did you have any rules that you set for yourself as a parent, which you immediately broke? And he did. I even asked both of my parents, are you more like your mom or your dad? And they shared a lot of really amazing qualities that I didn't know about my grandparents at the time. Then at the end of the year, Storyworth compiles all of their answers, puts them into this gorgeous book that covers everything. My parents love showing us their books, and I personally love getting a chance to read them. With Storyworth, I am giving those I love a thoughtful and personal gift from the heart that preserves their memories and stories for years to come. Go to storyworth.com/NGM and save $10 on your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/NGM to save $10 on your first purchase.
My son is playing a game right now on his computer where he's a thief and the cops are after him. So I'm so excited about this new app, Give As We Grow, where instead of being the quote unquote bad guys, kids are practicing giving back.
That is so cool, Joanne. I really wish that there was something like this when my kids were younger that got them excited about giving back to others and helped them build a better understanding of what it really means to volunteer.
Give As We Grow is the first of its kind free educational mobile app for children ages 8 to 11 that teaches kids via fun, service-focused minigame quests to tap into their unique talents and interests to help others.
And did you know that studies show that there is a biological connection between generosity and happiness, and that volunteering improves people's physical and mental health? I mean, kids who volunteer typically do better in school and are less likely to engage in risky behaviors. And that is something that I think we all want for our kids.
Ready to spark a new movement in generosity? Find and download Give As We Grow for free in the App Store for Android and iOS. And for resources for the whole family, visit giveaswegrow.org.
So I had a question, something that you just brought up. You talked about how your kids have a higher risk, and you already had mentioned earlier because of family history, right? What are some other factors that families may need to keep an eye out on that puts their children at a higher risk?
Yeah. So let's just start with the genetics thing. So the genetics thing is 50 to 60% of the picture right there. So a lot of people will simplify all the way down to, and I don't, but a lot of people will simplify all the way down to genetic is the key that you stick in the ignition, right?
Okay.
But then trauma is turning the key. So like there's this idea that like trauma in lots of different forms. And so that's one reason that what's called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are really important to understand. And I highly recommend Nadine Burke-Harris's book, The Deepest Well. She's a pediatrician, does an incredible job of going into the role of ACEs. So ACEs are things like, there was addiction in the home, there's violence in the home. There are lots of there's a score that you can get. It's really easy. Go online, Google ACE quiz or adverse childhood experiences quiz, and it'll come right up. You can get your ACE score.
We'll add that in the show notes, everybody.
Yeah, it's really easy to find. And it's a CDC Kaiser Permanente thing, and it's fantastic. And they've looked at it in huge numbers. So there's those things, but then there's things like early childhood aggression is a risk factor for substance abuse, and early, academic failure, social ostracism. But you can also see how those things get really complicated, because early aggression can turn into social ostracism, and early, academic issues can turn into social ostracism or aggression because kids are frustrated. So it's really early. It's important to get early interventions for those things so that we can untangle those things before they get all tangled up in each other. But then you have to realize also there is no gene for substance abuse, right? And I mentioned genetics and epigenetics. Epigenetics are not so much about our DNA, but about how parts of our DNA are expressed based on what happens in our environment. So for example, if you have someone who is violent in the home, it can actually cause your genes to express in different ways, and that can set you up for substance abuse. So anyway, the cool thing about the genes is that they're not only is there not one particular gene for substance abuse. A lot of the genes that we look at as suspecting that they have something to do with it also influence personality. So there's personality types that tend to be that I would just keep an eye on, thrill seekers, like compulsive novelty seekers. You need to keep an eye on kids who have diagnoses of ADD and ADHD. And there's a whole book on that. Gabor Mate writes about ADD and ADHD and the risks there. So there's a lot to look at, but I picture it like a scale. And the more and knowing your risk factors, I love the name of your podcast, because this is so not about guilt, right? No. This is about having the information. Mm-hmm. Like, even if you had a problem with substances and you've gotten better, you can't feel guilty about that stuff. That's in the past. Right. What you need to know is the information of what's my kid's risk, how much risk is on this side of the scale, so that I can heap as much prevention as possible on the other side of the scale to outweigh that. And so much of the book is spent on, okay, some people talk about, having an animal. Does that really help? Doing mindfulness exercises. Does that really help? All of these different things that there's sort of anecdotal evidence out there. I wanted to dive in and say, okay, well, does this really help? And can I trick my child into trying it with me to see what that experience is like? So the whole book is about knowing what the risks are. And then, okay, let's talk about all the protections we can heap on our kids.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you saying, it's a lot about education and educating your kids as far as like what to look out for and what to be aware of. And something that I saw actually mentioned in the review that you posted, the early review of your book, is how these shame strategies that have been used for years, they don't work.
Yeah. No, they don't work at all. That's why just say no doesn't work, because that's not real. Those aren't real refusal skills. From my perspective as a kid who grew up in a house with substance abuse, often what'll happen is, the kids will get totally gaslit by, people who are like, no, that's not what you see. No, your parent is fine. No, that's not what's happening. And
in fact, almost too. For,
and there's
behavior of someone.
There's just living. We know for a fact that people who live with lies and secrecy have increased risk because secrets do actually make us sick. It's a line from, yes, that's a line from Recovery. We're only as sick as our secrets, but it does happen to be true when you look at the research on what secrets and shame, and, go look at Brene Brown for all of her stuff on shame. That's what sort of keeps us sick. And lying to our kids really, really just doesn't work, mainly because they're smart enough to see through our lies. And then they can't trust us.
They are, and they remember that stuff. So like another thing I'm hearing with all of this is not only like giving them the strategies, which by the way, I love that you do that in the book, because I think we found that a lot with No Guilt Mom. Like a lot of us, we just need someone to, it's nice to tell us we have to do it, but give me somewhere to start. Give me an example. And that can be so helpful. But another thing I'm hearing you say too is that connection, keep that connection, which we say all the time when we've heard from every person we've talked to.
Yeah.
The connection is so important.
Well, also it's interesting because in a lot of families, like the family culture is, we don't talk about those things. Like we don't talk about them.
Well, the whole thing around substances. You
don't talk about it. That's a shameful thing. We don't talk about it. And what you're saying is the exact opposite. Like bring it out in the open, give kids the knowledge that they need, know their risk factors, and just make sure that you're there to connect with them.
Okay. Well, let's really, really, really play this down to a real basic level. Like we don't take that approach of let's not talk about it with other dangers in life. Like we don't tell our kids, we don't sit there and don't tell them about the importance of not running into the street. We tell them if you run in the street, you're going to get hit by a car. You don't touch fire because it's hot. Oh, but drugs and alcohol over there. Oh, we don't talk about that.
Yeah, but also think about the way we talk about those things. And I use the example of how we do like quote the sex talk. Well, there is no one sex talk. There is a lot. There are a lot of age appropriate conversations throughout life, and it's the same thing with drugs and alcohol. Like you're not going to have a conversation with a 6-year-old about not shooting heroin, but you can have a conversation about when you're watching television and there's a beer commercial on. And one thing that we actually do a lot in our family, mainly because we're so contrary and don't like to be manipulated. My kids joke about like, what are they selling there? Because it looks like they're selling, if you drink this thing, then you'll have a lot of really pretty friends and you'll, that kind of thing. Right. Yeah. So having these conversations about the media and, what they're seeing and hearing. And I go into the book on exposures that even very young children have to drugs and alcohol. Even in cartoons, it's crazy high. And here's one interesting thing. Kids as young as 4, when they have a substance abusing parent in the house, can differentiate between non-alcoholic drinks and alcoholic drinks. Kids as young as before, if you lined up sodas and beers, they could pull out which ones are alcoholic and which ones are not. And that was in kids who, are dealing with that in their home. So kids know, they're seeing the marketing, especially kids who are big sports fans, because of the amount of money that's spent to put alcohol in front of kids, in terms of sports. And the one thing I really want to stress here is, I'm not saying you can't drink. I'm not saying you can't watch sports. I'm not saying it's bad that alcohol companies purchase places on athletes' bodies to stick stickers and things like that. I'm not saying any of that is bad. I'm saying this is the world we live in. So how do we take that information, use it to our advantage in order to help protect our kids from needing to turn to drugs and alcohol later on? And there are very real things that I had never heard until I started researching them. There's this thing called pluralistic ignorance. It's really cool. It turns out if you ask a person, a kid, let's say a kid in college, ask that person how much they think their roommate drinks. Generally speaking, unless, their roommate is a non-drinker, they will overestimate how much their roommate drinks. We tend to overestimate how much other people care about drugs and alcohol. So that means that not only are we not offering opportunities to have non-alcoholic sort of events in colleges, it also means that for boys, they will up their consumption to match what their perception is, not reality, perception of how much alcohol matters to other people. But girls tend to not do that. What they tend to do is withdraw and isolate. So there's this pluralistic ignorance thing is fascinating. The research on that is fascinating because we're not reacting in places like college, especially to reality of how many other people are drinking. We're reacting to our very flawed perception of how much other people are drinking. So just knowing that's power. Just knowing that information is part of giving inoculation theory a chance to really take hold with kids.
That's amazing. I cannot wait until your book comes out and to read everything that I can do. And it's April 6th again, the addiction inoculation.
Please pre-order. For those of you out in the audience who don't understand how publishing works, pre-orders are so important to authors because it signals to the publisher how many people might buy this book and how many books to order. So if you wait until April 6th and it's out of stock, it's because, people didn't pre-order. So there you go.
Yes, you heard Jessica. Go pre-order right now. You could do that on Amazon. We will have a link. And Jessica, it's been a joy having you as always. It's so much fun. I learned so much every time you come on. Okay, every time we talk to Jessica, I leave with something new.
I just love that she wrote this book. I think it took a lot of time and self-reflection, as she talked about, to write about something so personal to her. Her experiences growing up in an addiction type environment, and then also going through that herself, and then trying to normalize it and prepare her children. I think that she has some amazing information that's going to be invaluable to parents and teachers.
I thought it was so interesting how she talked about like the genetic component of addiction, but just because you have like addiction in your family, it doesn't mean that gene will be turned on. And that's something that I didn't know about, that like those adverse childhood experiences, they are things that turn that gene on. And they're a way that like people look to cope with having like those strong emotions and strong feelings. And that's something that like I think I've heard in the past, but she really made it clear that, hey, this is what's going on. And this is why people need to know if they have a genetic component for alcoholism or addiction, just so they can be aware of how they're dealing with feelings.
You're right. Because, again, coming back to that adverse childhood experiences, it's interesting. It's this phenomenal study that was done back in the 90s in California through Kaiser Permanente. And you only know about it if you're in a certain field. Like the average Joe has no idea what we're talking about because they haven't had that experience. So we do have a link to this in the show notes if you'd like to learn some more about it. And again, it's just talking about how certain experiences can put you at higher risk for different things in your life when you grow up, including addiction, mental health, rehabilitation, run-ins with the law. So many different things that can occur.
And it doesn't mean that you're doomed if you have these experiences. We here at the No Guilt Mom podcast believe like knowledge is really power.
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. And if you know that there's a risk, then you're more likely to like be aware of it, and you're able to take steps to kind of mitigate that.
And I think that Jessica talks about that so much in when she was talking about the book and her experiences with her children, how she brings it right out. She just talks about it right out from the get-go. Because I think a lot of times, and I know I'm guilty of this for sure, when there's really tough discussions with my kids, I have to really hype myself up for them because I get nervous. I get scared. Am I going to say something wrong? Am I going to put it out the wrong way? I really don't want to talk about this because maybe if I don't talk about it, it won't happen. Yeah. Hashtag sticking the head in the sand. It does not make things go away. I've tried it with my bills.
So that totally reminds me of something. So we've been watching Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist and we're now caught up. So we're now waiting for the next episode, which is the end of March. But one of the episodes, it was after we did this interview with Jessica, and I'm so thankful because it helped me handle the situation better, is that Zoe's like next door neighbor comes back home and he is kind of like the free spirit. He just like takes things as they come, where Zoe's like very type A and likes to like do things and keep things accomplished. Anyways, he pulled out a bottle of pills and they decided that they were going to do pills and basically be stoned the whole day. And it was this episode. And, you know, that combined with musicals, you can kind of like see where that's going. But it really brought up the conversation with my kids because I had never talked to them about pills or anything before.
And you weren't expecting that to come up in that episode.
And I wasn't expecting it. Yeah. And so we were all watching it and I'm like, so like, what do you think of Zoe doing these pills? And they're like, oh, like my son, who I worry about the most, honestly, he's like, oh, it's fine, right? I'm like, okay. And we dialed it back and we had a really great conversation about like, you know, they put you out of control. You don't know if they're safe. You don't know what's in them. And just asking them those questions and kind of leading them through it. It was good. The outcome was good. And actually, Zoe, she did a lot of things she regretted and she couldn't take care of situations while she was on those pills. And so we did like make those consequences really, really prevalent as well.
Well, another great thing that I think you just showed that you did is you also pointed out how you gave them dialogue. And that was another thing Jessica talked about, giving your kids dialogue so they know what to do, what they know what to talk about. Because when you're in the moment, it's hard to think through those processes, especially for children.
Yeah. And so I went right back to Jessica and I'm like, okay, what did she say? It was the questions. Okay, I'll just start asking questions.
Right. So you definitely have to pick up Jessica's book. It's on pre-order right now. The Addiction Inoculation will have a link in the show notes for you. Definitely a must read.
And until next time, remember, the best mom's a happy mom. Take care of you. We'll see you later.
Thanks so much for stopping by. Are you looking for something to listen to with your whole family? Then check out 6 Minutes, produced and created by Gen Z Media. With over 200 twisty, cliffhanger-filled episodes, 6 Minutes tells the story of 11-year-old Holiday, who was pulled from the icy waters with no memory of who she is or where she came from.
3 years ago, Brinley Pasternak helped the Anders family uncover the truth about Holiday's past. Now she'll need them to help her find the truth about hers. In 6 Minutes Out of Time, the long-awaited sequel, Cyrus Anders is found unconscious near the mysterious Elixir Academy in Florida, and Brinley learns the school may have a shocking connection to her missing mother.
Dive in now and get the most downloaded family audio adventure in history. Follow 6 Minutes wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen early and ad-free with the GZM family subscription.